now joined by Angus King, independent senator from Maine, and luckily for us, typically an optimist on our airwaves. I want to, though, present to you, Adam Schiff this morning before he walked in at 1 o'clock described what's happening here in the Senate as the normalization of lawlessness. Cory Booker talked about finding these rare bunkers and havens for hope because there doesn't seem to be much that there would be a vote or anything resembling a fair trial. Joyce Vance, esteemed former U.S. attorney, described this as the death of the rule of law. Are we missing something? Are you seeing any glimmers of hope in that chamber that we're missing here on the television?
Well, you introduced me as a vessel of optimism, but I'm afraid I can't share much today, Nicole. There's something going on here that I think is very significant that's hasn't really come out, and that is, I like to look at something like this and say, how will we feel about this 10 years from now or 20 years from now? And what I see is a slow motion abdication of its responsibility by Congress. We've given up on the war power. We've given up on the trade power. We've given up last year on the power of the purse when we allowed the president to do what he did with the wall. And now we're giving up on oversight. I mean, the implication of this argument is that the president can say, you can't have anything and you got to go to court. But there was an incredible moment today where the Department of Justice said in the court today that the court shouldn't enforce congressional subpoenas, and the judge said, well, what's Congress's remedy? And believe it or not, the Department of Justice said impeachment. And here we are talking about impeachment, and they're telling us we can't use the subpoenas because of privileges. There are ways to deal with privileges. You have depositions, you claim a privilege, you go ahead and get the information. The judge then decides. And the House managers last night said, look, we'll live with the decisions of the Chief Justice of the United States. I thought it was really telling when the White House managers got up and said, we won't do that. We won't take that chance that John Roberts will call them straight.
Senator King, is there any reason to hope that there's any sort of Hail Mary move either on the part of John Bolton himself or any sort of revelation that could still come into public view from his upcoming manuscript that you think could shake loose this vote on witnesses, which seems to be locked in?
I think there are a couple of things. One is I'm not sure the vote on witnesses is locked in. I mean, I can think of the very strong possibility of 4 votes, which would change everything. Secondly, there is a possibility John Bolton could have a press conference today and say what he knows. And by the way, I'm not sure John Bolton is going to be, the ideal witness for the House managers. But I still think we need to hear from him because he has knowledge that's at the heart of the case. But right now, if I had to bet, I would say that I'll give it 50-50 that they'll have the 4 votes. And by the way, I think if they get 4, they'll get more than that. And that we will see witnesses. I've had it with the idea that we're tired and we can't take the time. I mean, seriously, I did a little calculation last night. About 250 people in the history of the United States have had this responsibility. And we say we've got to get it done by the State of the Union or the Super Bowl, or I'm tired, we're working long days. There are people in Biddeford, Maine right now working 2 shifts. And we say, well, it would take a few extra weeks. Give me a break. That's not what our responsibility here is.
God bless you for saying that, sir. I want to ask you one more question about the substance of the arguments being put forth by the president's attorneys. They seem to range from distractions, talk of the Steele dossier, and unrelated matters to faux outrage. How dare you ask if Rudy Giuliani is being paid by the president? And then detours to really exotic legal theories, such as if it's in Donald Trump's interest to be reelected, then it's in the nation's interest. What do you worry about in terms of the kind of the substantive legal arguments coming out, if you can even call them that, of the president's side?
Well, I've mentioned that I'm really worried about the long-term implications of essentially saying a president can stonewall Congress, because that cuts off oversight, everything else. The other piece is, the arguments that were made last night were just unbelievable, that a president could, call up the prime minister of Israel and say, I'm cutting off military aid unless you come to the United States a week before the election and endorse me or charge my opponent with anti-Semitism. Are we really going to say that's okay? I just can't believe it. By the way, I don't think Alan Dershowitz is in the hall today. I didn't see him at the table. You guys have a better view of the table than I do, but check it out when we go back to see whether he's here, because I think that argument last night was preposterous, and that if the president thinks it's in it's in the national interest for him to be reelected, he can do whatever he wants. Come on, that's really dangerous. We're in really tough shape then.
This is why we love having you. You enlighten us, you sometimes give us reasons for optimism, and you give us tips for where to point our cameras to see if Alan Dershowitz is in the chamber. Thank you very much, Senator King, for spending some time with us. We're grateful. Come back if you learn anything or want to share anything with our viewers.